Bruce Catton spent 30 years studying the American Civil War, but it was when he discovered a lost telegram from Grant that his life changed forever. In that document, Catton found proof of a strategy so brutal and brilliant that it completely transformed his understanding of what it truly means to win a war. This is the story of the discovery that made America's greatest historian realize he knew very little about the man who saved the Union. When Bruce Catton found this telegram in 1952, he was in his Michigan office, surrounded by stacks of documents he had already read hundreds of times. But this message from Grant to Sherman was different. The words written there revealed a mind so cold and calculating that Catton had to stand up and walk around the room to process what he had just discovered. Catton realized in that moment that he wasn't looking at a kind-hearted general who won by having more soldiers. He was looking at a predator who had engineered the most sophisticated hunt in American military history. And today, you're going to find out exactly what Catton discovered that day that changed his career forever. Bruce Catton never forgot the first time he read about the surrender at Appomattox. He was just 12 years old, flipping through a book in his hometown library in Michigan. The image that stuck in his mind was of Grant being magnanimous with Lee, the generous victor with the noble defeated. But decades later, when Catton became the most respected historian of the Civil War, he discovered that this romantic image hid a much darker and more fascinating truth. During his research in the National Archives, Catton found that Grant hadn't just defeated Lee, he had hunted him with the precision of a predator who knows its prey's every move. And the strategy Grant used was so revolutionary that it changed warfare forever. Catton spent years trying to understand how Grant managed to do the impossible, defeat the military genius that was Robert E. Lee. Every other Union general had tried and failed. McClellan, Hooker, Burnside, all were outsmarted by Lee's tactical brilliance. But Bruce Catton discovered that Grant didn't try to outsmart Lee with tactics. He completely changed the rules of the game. It was on a December night in 1953 that Catton had his first major epiphany. He was in his personal library, comparing battle reports, when he noticed a pattern no one had seen before. Grant wasn't trying to win individual battles, he was orchestrating the systematic destruction of Lee's ability to wage war. And when Catton understood that, he realized he was looking at the most sophisticated military mind America had ever produced. Bruce Catton discovered that Grant had developed what he called a strategy of total annihilation. It wasn't just about winning battles, it was about destroying the South's ability to keep fighting. Catton realized this when he analyzed the numbers. While Lee was winning brilliant tactical battles, Grant was systematically reducing the pool of Confederate soldiers in a way Lee couldn't replace. It was then that Catton understood Grant's cruel genius. Every battle Lee won left him weaker, because Grant could replace his losses and Lee couldn't. During his research, Catton became obsessed with understanding how Grant thought. He spent months studying every order, every telegram, every strategic decision. Catton discovered that Grant had created something revolutionary, the first modern war. A war where resources, logistics, and coordination mattered more than individual tactical genius. It was in that moment that Catton realized Grant wasn't just a general, he was a visionary who had anticipated the nature of modern industrial warfare. Catton discovered that Grant's strategy had three fundamental pillars that no one had fully understood. Grant knew he could accept losses that Lee couldn't. Catton uncovered telegrams where Grant coldly calculated how many soldiers he could afford to lose each month while maintaining constant pressure on Lee. In a letter to Sherman, Grant wrote, "We can lose 2 men to their 1 and still win." When Catton read that, he understood he was looking at a mind that had mathematized war. Catton discovered that Grant was the first general in history to coordinate multiple fronts simultaneously. While he was pressuring Lee in Virginia, Sherman was marching through Georgia, and Sheridan was devastating the Shenandoah Valley. Catton realized that Lee, for all his brilliance, was fighting an 18th century war against a 20th century strategist. Catton's most revealing discovery was realizing that Grant had declared war not just on the Confederate Army, but on the South's very ability to make war. Catton found orders from Grant instructing his generals to destroy railroads, factories, farms, everything that sustained the Confederate war effort. It was a strategy of total annihilation. It was on an autumn afternoon in 1954 that Bruce Catton had the revelation that would define his career. He was reading a Union intelligence report when he found definitive proof of Grant's genius. The document revealed that Grant knew exactly where Lee would be at every crucial moment of the campaign. It wasn't luck, it was an intelligence network so sophisticated that Lee was being tracked like an animal being hunted. Catton realized in that moment that Grant had turned Lee from predator into prey. And Lee didn't even know it. Catton discovered that in the final months of the war, Grant had encircled Lee in a way so subtle that the Confederate general only realized it when it was too late. Lee's every move was being anticipated. Every escape route was being blocked. Every source of supplies was being cut off. Catton found evidence that Grant had planned the surrender at Appomattox 6 months before it happened. He knew exactly where Lee would try to go and had set the perfect trap. During his research, Catton realized that Grant possessed a rare quality, the ability to think like his enemy. Catton discovered diaries where Grant analyzed Lee's personality with surgical precision. He knew that Lee was too proud to retreat, too brave to surrender easily, and too smart to fall for obvious traps. So Grant created a trap that didn't look like a trap. He gave Lee the illusion that he still had a chance, while systematically closing off all exits. When Catton understood this, he realized he had spent decades studying not just a war, but the mind of one of the most sophisticated strategists in human history. Catton's discovery about Grant's strategy completely changed our understanding of the Civil War. He proved that Grant hadn't won through brute force, but through a combination of strategic genius and psychological coldness. Catton later wrote that this discovery haunted him for years. He had spent so long admiring Lee's nobility that he had almost missed Grant's dark genius. Catton realized that Grant's strategy revealed universal truths about leadership and competition. Grant had shown that sometimes victory doesn't come from being the most brilliant, but from being the most systematic. Not from winning every battle, but from winning the war. This discovery changed Bruce Catton as a historian and as a person. He learned that history is rarely about heroes and villains, it's about complex minds making decisions in impossible circumstances. Catton wrote that studying Grant taught him that true genius isn't about being perfect, but about being relentless in the pursuit of your goals. Bruce Catton spent the rest of his career exploring the implications of this discovery. He realized he had found not just a military strategy, but a model for how exceptional minds operate under extreme pressure. Catton discovered that Grant had done something few leaders in history have managed. He had turned his greatest challenges into his greatest advantages. The strategy Grant used to corner Lee is still studied today in military schools around the world. It teaches us that sometimes victory doesn't come from being the strongest, but from being the smartest about how to use our strength. If you want to find out more about how Bruce Catton transformed our understanding of the Civil War, and how his discoveries continue to reveal secrets about leadership and strategy that changed American history forever, then you need to know about the next explosive discovery Catton made about Lincoln, a revelation that will completely transform your view of the president who saved the Union.